We got a whole lot of Sugar Bowl coverage coming for you.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation and Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our written work over there at si.com/college/Washington. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. And Lars, like I said in the opener, we've got a whole lot of Sugar Bowl coverage coming because there's just so much to talk about with this game. And one thing that I've been talking about with some of our other friends and just some people that are just as invested in this game as we are. One of the biggest things for Washington is starting fast, like they did in the Pac-12 championship game. You know, they jump out to a 20-3 lead in that game at some point in the second quarter. And they were clicking on all cylinders, not just offensively, but defensively as well, getting 2-3 and out to start the game. And starting fast is going to be huge. And just keeping Texas on their toes and just getting a good first punch in. And I think that's huge. What do you think would be the best way for Washington to start fast?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with controlling the clock, right? Not controlling it in the sense of run, pass. Sure. But there's because there's an interesting balance you have to run with. As we talked about yesterday on the show. Texas, when you play with tempo, the defense is susceptible. So maybe if Washington uses a little bit of tempo, but then okay, now you're using up less clock in that theory because you're playing with more pace. So I think there's a way to do it to where you can line up, you kind of get the ball ready, and you kind of, it actually kind of almost feeds perfectly into what Utah likes to do on offense because they want to get everyone lined up and then go to the check. Right. Because once you go into making that check, then you can't make substitutions. So even though the defense is able to catch their breath in theory, so the tempo kind of gets wasted a little bit, you're still keeping the same personnel on the field. And really what this game is going to come down to is what Ryan Grubb loves most, and that's personnel mismatches, right? How do you get, Dillon Johnson or Will Nixon or somebody else, lined up against a Texas safety or maybe even a Texas linebacker, right? Because all of this is to thwart Texas's front seven. Because if you can hold up on the offensive line and hold up in the box, it's a field day on the back end. So, and that, which again fits perfectly for Washington. So how you start fast is just keep Michael Penix on schedule early, first couple, almost in a way, kind of like the USC game. If you think back to what that game was like, where it's like both Caleb Williams and Michael Penix ball getting out early, just completions, and you're just using up clock, right? You're possessions are going to be limited in this game. That's a fact, right? It almost seems like. And if you think back to the Alamo Bowl last year, it's the same sort of principle, right? Where, this is going to be an offensive showcase. It's an offensive shootout. It's like, the game is 27-20. So it wasn't necessarily a shootout. So it's kind of like, in a way, it's like the NFL, right? Where, hey, take your points when you can get them. Make sure you don't put yourself beyond the sticks in third and manageable and third and long. Stay on schedule. And then defensively, it also starts with, no matter what the offense is able to do, if they get 3 or 7 on the first couple of drives, it's just force Texas to either be in those third down situations where you can get them off the field, or at the very least, don't get gashed in the run game. Because if Quinn Ewers you up, okay, we all know Quinn's better than Washington's pass defense, right? I think that's a fair assessment. But Washington proves that they can hold up against the run. So if they get gashed early, then that fast start goes out the window. So it matters on both sides of the ball, to your point.
No, you're absolutely right. Because I want to talk about the defensive side really quickly, because we know what Washington's offense can look like. We've seen it time and time again with Jalen McMillan, without Jalen McMillan. Obviously, you prefer to have that with McMillan, because then you get the whole trio of wide receivers in there, everything else. But on the defensive side, we hadn't seen that for a while. We had seen Washington struggle to make tackles, struggle to get off the field, and then in the Pac-12 championship game, they flip a switch. All of a sudden, they're tackling really well. Like I said earlier, 2-3 and outs to start the game. So finding a way to start the game fast on defense, whether it be a sack, whether it be a turnover, or whether it just be getting early stops and not letting Quinn Ewers and the Texas offense get into rhythm, I think that that's just as important, if not more important, I think I might lean toward it being more important because we know what the offense can do. Yeah, Texas defense, especially running the ball, they've got really great numbers when it comes to run defense. But we know that Washington is going to find a way to score points because they found a way to do that all season long. So the question is just, can the defense hold up, in my opinion? Can the defense find a way to get off the field and just create more opportunities for Washington to go out and score? Because, like I just said, we know they love to do that. We know they can find ways to do that. And especially with this whole complement of receivers, plus a month to prepare, plus everything else, those two things are going to feed really, really well off each other in this game.
Right, exactly. Because the ironic point in all of it is we've seen, we kind of talked about that. Has Washington played a complete game, right? The Pac-12 championship was that complete game, right? So for the defense, and this is also an opportunity for, I think really the linebackers, right? Because that's for Washington for me, where it's like, at least on the defensive side, right? Because, if Cam Fab and Asa Turner can both be healthy in the game, that's another big plus. But I think especially, stopping Texas's run game and slowing down all the pieces that they have, it's really is going to start with Edifano Lefuscio on the linebackers, because if you can contain both Ewers, kind of keep him in the pocket, maybe use him as a blitz, use some of the linebackers as a blitzer, and really kind of force those second and third reads to go away. That's how you're forcing Texas into, third and 10, getting him off the field. Because if they're just able to hand the ball off, they don't even have to worry about anything else. That's your first problem. Second one is going to be if Quinn Ewers is able to get quick passes out or check downs and things like that. So there's two factors right there that I think both honestly play into Washington's hand, because that's, the linebackers, we saw them get much better towards the end of the season. And then we obviously saw the impression that Cam Fabiculana and Asa Turner made in the Pac-12 championship game with the impact that they had in the secondary.
Right. And there's so much to dissect on that side of the ball. Of course, we're going to do a whole lot more of that on the Monday show as well. But I think that one thing that I'm really curious to see how they're utilized on the offensive side, because it all comes together, right, is the group of tight ends. How are we going to see Jack Westover, Devin Colt, maybe even Josh Cuevas, Quentin Moore get involved in this game? Are we going to see them, just out there as run blockers a lot early on, and you try to establish the run with Dillon Johnson? Or do you just try to keep Texas on its toes and just say, okay, we're going to send Jack Westover over the middle on just a 7-yard, and he's going to sit down right there at the first down marker? Are they going to do something like that just to find a way to get Michael Penix into rhythm? Because it all comes back to starting fast, and that's something that you can do. And I just think that because we're going to talk about the receivers a lot more, and that's all going to be huge. But I think that watching the tight ends could end up being key, because you talk about the Texas linebackers, where that's a talented group right there, where if you're all of a sudden moving them off the ball because you feel a little bit more threatened by what Jack Westover is going to do over the middle of the field, then that opens up more lanes for Dillon Johnson. And I'm just really curious to see how that aspect of the game is going to be utilized.
Yeah, and I think that, which again, I know kind of repeating myself, but it feeds into the perfect opportunity for Washington, because that's, Ryan Grubb loves to scheme guys open. And when you see a weakness, especially in the Texas secondary, there's somebody's going to be open, right? And then that's where, okay, can the pass rush, can the offensive line hold up enough to let Penix get to potentially his second and third read? Because if if you run with the theory that the offensive line gets blown off the ball, well then run or pass, it's not going to work. So this everything starts with the Joe Moore award-winning offensive line holding up against this. Arguably, probably is what their biggest test of the season from a front seven perspective. Like, ironically, Brent Venables said that Arizona is going to be the toughest team they played this season, which is ironic because Texas lost to Oklahoma in the regular season, and then Washington be like, "Oh, you think it's Oregon being the toughest defense?" No, it's Texas. It's Texas. So it's just a little bit of gamesmanship this time of year. You gotta love it.
Oh, you always gotta love that. All right, Lars, let's kind of jump over to the Texas side of things a little bit. We're going to talk about what Texas might be able to exploit on the Washington side, but first we got to get into some ads. And we're going to send a shout out to our good friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophies, also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. For all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. So, Lars, when you look at Texas, what do you think is the biggest mismatch that you might see when it comes to how they can take advantage of what Washington wants to do? Because for me personally, I think it's Ja'Tavion Sanders at tight end, but I really want to hear what you think, and then I'll get a little bit of my reasoning there.
Yeah, I think for me, everything kind of starts with the Texas' front seven, and so I'd probably say the combination of the edge outside linebacker play, because I think that's where this thing is really going to get decided. Because for all the not smaller, but maybe kind of more nuanced, matchups in the game, Jabbar Muhammad versus Xavier Worthy, Odunze versus whoever in the Texas secondary. Everything starts with can you contain Trevon Sweat in Texas's front seven. I think, so I would say probably Parker Brailsford versus Tiana Sweat's with that, it's not a big concern, but kind of like that's the matchup for me. We're like, hey, that's kind of where you win and lose this game, right? Because if you're bringing in an extra offensive lineman, now you're sacrificing, to your point, a tight end, and Quentin Moore going out. Now he's going to stay in and block and kind of help balance out the line. So I think it's a matter of if Parker can handle those one-on-ones early, then that makes a big statement for Washington, saying, hey, the concern that we had is not much of a concern. So now we're going to explode one of your concerns, which is your secondary.
Right.
So to me, it's not a concern, right? In the sense of, I don't think that Parker can handle it. I think he can. It's just a matter of that will be the biggest kind of check mark, especially early on in the game.
No, I hear where you come from a lot, because I want to flip it over just to the other side real fast, where it's because it's a very similar conversation, but it's Ja'Tavion Sanders against Washington's linebackers, because I think that he's a really talented tight end in terms of what he can do as a pass catcher. And we haven't necessarily seen Washington's linebackers be asked to cover a whole ton this season. The only time we really saw that was against Stanford, and Stanford did a really good job of just kind of exploiting them and finding a way to take advantage of those mismatches. Because I think we talk about Xavier Worthy. I'm really curious to see how healthy he is. We know that he was dealing with the high ankle sprain after the Big 12 championship game. So we'll kind of see what his speed looks like and everything. And then A.D. Mitchell, we know that he's going to do some things. He's a really talented player. And it's just kind of a matter of limiting what he can do. But if you're limiting those guys, you can't let a tight end over the middle beat you, where he's a big physical guy. He's able to break some tackles, but it's just a matter of, all right, who are you going to ask to cover him, and how is that going to look? Are you going to just try to bracket him in his zone? Are you going to force Dom Hampton or maybe Mish Powell to just man up on him? Because then, it's a size difference, right? So there are a whole bunch of different ways that Texas and Steve Sarkisian can find a way to exploit that. And I'm just really curious to see how Washington's defense is going to counter that, because that, in my opinion, could make or break this game.
No doubt. I mean, the other thing that's going to make or break Texas, make or break the game, especially for Texas, is how do you replace Jonathan Brooks, right? I mean, Texas has had, especially last season, without Roschon Johnson and Bijan Robinson. Hey, you didn't face our best players. It's like, okay, well, for 2 straight years, Cam Davis hasn't faced Texas, so I think especially this year, even his absence proved how significant he was in 2022. 2022. But if you're Texas, is Jaden Blue enough? Is Kalen Robinson enough? There's, because for Washington, it's pretty clear. It's Dillon Johnson, and then Dillon Johnson and friends, right? Dillon Johnson and co, right? It's now when you're looking at Texas. Well, if you're forcing Quinn Ewers, and that was kind of the ironic part about the Alamo Bowl last year, is Texas had success running the ball, and then Steve Sarkisian was like, no, we're going to win this game as a passing offense. We're going to pass all over. And it really played into Washington's hands. Like, wow, we're actually not getting tested. We can kind of lean back and, not play prevent, but, kind of expect more passes than runs. That feeds. So there's also kind of the play calling game between Ryan Grubb, Steve Sarkisian, Chuck Morrell, and Pete Kwiatkowski, because it's going to be a chessboard. The second Washington finds something, Texas is going to figure it out, and vice versa. So anything that does become a concern might even happen actually in the game, more so than any of the potential matchups going into the other. Right, we got to talk about it, right? Because they're intriguing matchups and things like that. But almost like that, this type of game, especially with these two coaching staffs, breeds counter the counter. Block the punch, counter, block. And you're gonna keep doing that, and knowing that you're gonna get punched a couple of times in that scenario. So it's how do you handle those punches? How do you manage? Again, they were down against Oregon in the championship game, so it's not like they can't come back again. And I would almost be surprised if at some point Washington doesn't have to come back against Texas, because that's just kind of how this team has been built and carried themselves throughout the entire season, which isn't bad, right? Because again, ultimately you're winners, so that's all that matters at the end of the day.
Right. So, and I kind of want to take that a step further, because especially when you talk about the run defense for Washington, where we just saw that at its best against Bucky Irving, Jordan James, and a really, really talented Oregon offensive line, where they found a way to bring down a guy who had been just impossible to tackle for the majority of the season, which we saw in Washington's first matchup. Both those guys were really, really hard to tackle. And I think that that's a promising side moving forward. And of course, it's still going to be, all right, show me what you have before I say, okay, yeah, I'm really confident in this. But I think that everything on that front is trending in the right direction. And we talked about that complete game to open the show, where combining that kind of performance, where, okay, yeah, we know that we can get, if Chuck Morrell and William Andrews say, all right, we know we can get Texas into a 2nd and 8 and a 3rd and 7, where we don't necessarily have to worry about getting gashed for 5, 6, 7 yards every time they hand the ball off, then I feel like they're going to feel a lot more confident in their secondary as well, because we saw that against Oregon. And Oregon was they were the hottest team in the nation going into that game. They were the highest flying offense. They're doing all these different things. And Washington found a way for like an entire half to shut them down. Did a fantastic job of doing so. And I think that Texas is going to do some different things, but I think that whatever they did in that game, they're going to come into this one with a similar game plan. And I wouldn't be surprised if it works out really, really well to start the game for this Washington defensive staff.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it almost it's kind of the irony of the situation, right? Where the offense got you to the situation, now the defense might actually win you a national championship, right? And that's not to say that the offense won't score points, right? This isn't going to be Arizona State. This is, if anything, will be more Arizona than anything else, because it's, again, that time of year, you're two really good teams you're going to be facing, no matter who you face in the next 2 games. So, yeah, it's just a matter of, can Washington make less mistakes, right? If Elijah Jackson does get beat once, does he not get beat again, right? And I think that's, those are the small matchups to where those potential concerns that were there in the beginning of October weren't there at the end of November, right? Where you could see Elijah got better, Thaddeus got better, Jabbar, not that he needed to get better, but he didn't regress. Let's put it that way, right? Cam Fab came along, Dom did pretty well, so all the questions.
Asa coming back was a big thing too.
Right. And so the only real question mark is, can anybody not named Bralen Trice get some pressure? And I think that sure. The answer is yes. Have we seen it as much? No. But there's also a few extra bodies that are now going to be available for the game that I think, potentially could add their name to the sack total. And I think that's kind of where the chess match comes into play for games like this is, okay, who can make that play that you avoid Tanufi, right? Maybe even a Jacob Lane or Zach Durfee, depending on who gets more snaps in that situation. Probably Durfee in that situation. But can somebody make a play that's not or can Carson Bruner make a sack, right? It has to be somebody that's not expected to make a play that ends up being one of the key separators at the end of the day.
So are you just trying to tease our next segment right here, where we're going to talk about some of those guys who that's the whole thing, a surprise X factor. We're going to get into that, where maybe you don't expect these guys to make a play. Maybe they don't take a ton of snaps, but they made the biggest play of the game. But first, we got some ads to get into. And we're going to give a shout out to our friends over at PrizePicks, because PrizePicks is the most fun you can have, winning up to 25 times your money this football season. And now you can play during basketball season too. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. And I've actually had a lot of fun playing PrizePicks while I'm here in California. I've got one that I've got cooking up here for this Thursday night, where I've got Kristaps Porzingis more than 22.5 points, Derek White more than 4 rebounds, Drew Holiday more than 5.5 assists, and I'm getting that all together with Breece Hall more than 1/2 of a receiving or rushing touchdown. So check in with me on Friday, see if I'm, if I'm a little bit richer after that. Shout out to the Celtics because I love just riding with my Celtics. And PrizePicks is really simple to play. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types are what make PrizePicks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. And if you want to get in on the action, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy sports made easy. So Lars, do you want to kick it? So we're going to do this a little bit different from our normal bold predictions, which we will still have coming all the everydayers on our Monday show when we do our normal game preview breakdown. But Lars, you want to kick us off with your first X factor in this game?
Yeah, so I think we've touched on a couple of them in this game. So I'll start on the offensive side. And again, these are X factors, so it's probably guys that should contribute, right? But are not. Like Odunze is not the X factor, right? That's to be clear, kind of paint the picture, right, if you will, right? Bralen Trice isn't the X factor, right?
Right. We know those guys are going to contribute.
Those are the A factors, if you will.
Yeah.
Right? We're the very bottom of the alphabet here. So I'm going to start with. Not as much of an X factor, but it is given the number of guys they're going to have back for the game. What does Jeremy Bernard do in this game?
Because I like that. I was going to go there too. Yeah,
because that's a guy to me where he can run the ball, catch the ball, do all this various number of things, and honestly, maybe we can make an impact on special teams. And I think that would be kind of the key. Where how do they get Jeremy the ball and where, right? Because we saw early in the season Michigan State can get in as a running back, even late in the season. I believe in the Pac-12 championship could get in as a running back, air quotes, underround running back. But
we saw, in fairness, we did see him line up at running back in the Arizona game too. So it's there.
Right. And so obviously, the key is, Polk, McMillan, and McMillan, Polk, McMillan, and Rome. And, kind of the obvious characters kind of doing that load. Sure. But it's going to be that one touchdown at the end of the third quarter or fourth quarter where it's like, hey, that one random Jeremy Bernard touchdown really did separate the game at the end of the day when it's a 7 or 10 point game at the end. So,
right.
Jeremy's start off going to be one of those key X factors.
So I'm going to go with Julius Bujo for sticking on the offensive side here. So I don't know if that's necessarily a surprise considering the offensive line won the Joe Moore Award. So let me know in the comments if that's not a surprise X factor, but let me give you my reasoning why. Because I think that Nate Kalepo, who's a little bit bigger size-wise, and Parker Brailsford are going to be asked to double team T'Vondre Sweat for the majority of the game. Where I think that that's going to be the protection scheme that Ryan Grubb is going to draw up. And I think that that's going to leave Julius Bujo one-on-one with Byron Murphy II a whole lot in this game. And I think that because Byron Murphy, he did a good job in the first game against Washington. They played the Alamo Bowl last year. He did a really good job of getting some pressure. And he's done a really good job of doing that all season long. Having T'Vondre Sweat next to him definitely helps a lot, but he's a really talented player in his own right. But I think that Julius Bujo, who has said himself that he's a much better pass blocker than he is run blocker due to him being 6'8" and 320 pounds. So I think that he's the kind of guy where Henry Bainivalu last year just wasn't able to get the same push because we like Henry. We know Henry's a little bit better as a run blocker than he was in pass protection. And now you kind of flip that around with Julius Bujo, who's got a little bit more size, a little bit more length. And I think that he can do a much better job of kind of finding ways to keep Byron Murphy out of the backfield and limiting that interior pressure where if we don't see that as much in this game, we know what Michael Penix can do with the football.
Yeah, that's actually a fair comparison, right? Because the one guy that has the one-on-one matchup is going to be the key. So that's a perfect X factor. So I'm going to go on the defensive end, and I'm going to say a guy that I already mentioned earlier in the show, kind of teased it a little bit. Boyton Newfie is one for me where, again, and the reason I say Voigt, because, again, I'm going to throw Zion in that Bralen Trice group, okay? So, because again, if you're a starter, you can be an X factor, but it's kind of hard to make that case, right? Because it's kind of like, hey, who's that one or two guys that we're not talking about that we're going to be talking about after the game? That to me is what an X factor is. So that's why I say avoid Sanufi, because to your point, same thing with Washington, they're going to need to get some pressure on Quinn Ewers, right? Bralen Trice is probably going to get double teamed with Cohen Banks and maybe a tight end, right? So somebody's going to be chipping Bralen Trice, so it's not just him versus Banks one-on-one. Because if it's him versus Banks one-on-one, I kind of like his chances every now and then. So it's like, like it'll be a good matchup, right? But I think, that certainly invites Trice to get some potential wins there. But it's going to take a guy like Voigt Sanufi in one of those hybrid kind of turbo packages on second and third down where, okay, Trice is double teamed now. Voigt as an undersized lineman can kind of cut underneath in the interior offensive on the Texas's offensive line and find ways to either pressure Quinn Ewers, force an incompletion, or just get a sack. And those are the plays that are going to decide the game, whether it's in the first half or second half. It's, similar, like, can you move Bo Nix off his spot? Can you move Quinn Ewers off his spot? Because if he's just kind of throwing, Jake Browning, if you will, kind of just lobs up there, now you're kind of playing into Cam Fab's, in the secondary's hand of, hey, you're just throwing it up there. It's not our guys are beat. You're just hoping to not get sacked. So you got to throw it up, and that's how you get turnovers, and that's how you ultimately beat Texas.
So I like where he comes from there. And I wanted to stick on the defensive side with my next one as well. And I wanted to talk about Thaddeus Dixon because I'm really curious to see how this corner group can hold up against Texas wide receiver corps. We know they're really good. And you talked a little bit about, Elijah Jackson and how we're going to see a lot from Xavier Worthy and A.D. Mitchell. And my question is, how is the third cornerback going to hold up? Where I think that Thaddeus, he fits really well. And Lars, you and I know we've had a lot of at-length conversations about Thaddeus' fit in the defense and how he's needed to learn to play at this level, where you can tell from watching him play that he's very used to being a physical corner. And not the best way to say this is not necessarily having to worry about the referees, where he likes to get his hands on guys and will get off them a little late. Where we've seen a couple pass interference calls. We've seen a couple of calls that were definitely ticky-tacky, like the one where he had the pick six against Cal, where that one was a little bit unlucky. But he's had some bad penalty calls go against him, but he fits this scheme really well. And as you said, over the last month or so, we've seen him really evolve. And while he's not necessarily, a top-tier cornerback just yet, you can see the potential. You can see why they took him out of Long Beach City College last year. And you see all those things coming together. And in a game like this, where you don't want some of these guys to get free releases, Thaddeus Dixon is the perfect guy to just have him play press and just not let any of these receivers get off the line of scrimmage and throw off their timing with Quinn Ewers.
The agenda is back, baby. I love it.
The agenda never left.
No, but the agenda took some hits midway through.
I never said it didn't. Never said it didn't.
I remember the amount of times looking over at you like, hey, the agenda is shifting.
You were just nudging me a little bit. You're like, oh.
The agenda was like some windshield everybody was like, okay, Thaddeus, Jabbar.
Hey, those are completely different.
That's what I said, but for two completely different reasons and two completely different ways, to be very clear, because you're not saying Jabbar and Thaddeus are the same person. Just be clear.
Let's be clear there.
So as much as I said that you can't be a starter and be an X factor, I lied. My X factor in this situation is going to be Grady Gross. My guy Grady Gross is going to find a way to.
I'm glad you got a shout out for Grady in here.
Because you see where again because it's true. If you're an offensive or defensive starter, kind of hard to consider you an X factor. You can say like keys to the game, right? These are the key 2 or 3 guys, and then your X factor is that extra guy, right? That's what kind of part of the X stands for, I think. So Grady Gross again gets you the Apple Cup win, gets you the Oregon. Well, not the Oregon win, but kind of, kicks a number of key field goals towards the end of the season. Again, obviously gets on scholarship. You just know Grady's going to somehow factor into this game. And I mean, I'm not saying he hits the game winner, but I'm just saying, he's going to have at least one. Grady Gross 1.5 field goals. I would probably take the over. I can see two. I think that could, because that's one where, again, Kalen's been much better at taking the points. Again, crazy 4th down call against Washington State to do the reverse read to Rome and all that, but you still have been taking the points when you need to. So you're not going to be chasing points at the end of the game because Kalen's a smart coach. He knows what he's doing. So that screams, give me Grady Gross in the final minute of the game to push you to a national championship.
No, I like that. And I'm glad you because I was thinking we got to find a way to get some special teams in here. So I'm really glad you did that. I want to go with one more, and I'm also going to go with special teams, and I'm going to go with Daniel Ngata, where since he's taken over on kick return, he hasn't provided, and this is not a slight when I say this, he hasn't provided the same just kind of electricity that Jeremy Bernard did early on in the kick return, or every single game it felt like he was going to take one back. But Daniel Ngata is shown to be really, really shifty and really, really impressive in the kick return game, where he's found some seams, he's found some holes, and has been able to break a few decent kick returns. And if he can do that once or twice in this game, because Washington's special teams unit is one of the best in the country, and I feel like that's something we haven't talked about enough over the course of the season. They've done such a fantastic job returning kicks, covering punts, everything. They've done a really, really great job of that. So I think that is something where it's going to play a factor in this game. And if Daniel Ngata can give the Huskies the ball at the 35 or the 40-yard line once or twice in this game, that's going to be massive.
I mean, that's a perfect kind of, I'm not sure if that's the last one you want to do, but that's a perfect.
Yeah, no, I'm good there. Yeah.
Because that kind of ties everything together. It's again, it's always, it sounds cliche and we understand that, but you're looking at, okay, so here's the ironic part about this game. 3 of the 4 teams in the college football playoff rank in the top 5 in PFF for special teams grades. Alabama, Texas, Washington. So that tells me this game, and by the way, Washington is the only one in this matchup where they are ranking in the top 5 and certainly the top 10 in 2 out of 3 categories, offense and special teams. So tell me that doesn't scream Washington by 4.5 or 5.
Sure, no, that absolutely does. We're gonna give some shout outs to our friends on FanDuel on Monday, but no, I'm with you there, 100%.
But man, yeah. So again, I didn't want to slight Jack McAllister because again, you hope they don't have to punt, but again, he is going to be him and kind of Grady Gross are going to cut in the same cloth of, hey, if you do have to punt and you pin Texas inside the 5 and then they go 3 and out, and those are the small plays where, again, to finish what I was saying earlier, I know it's cliche, but again, that's these 3 or 4 plays are going to decide the game. We said it against Oregon, said it against, and we didn't say it against Washington State, but it was almost kind of implied. We're like, hey, rivalry game, Apple Cup, you're going to need to make a couple of key plays, and every time it's happened, USC, Oregon again, like this is that kind of game where someone's got to step up that we're not expecting.
Right. And I'm sure we'll see that. And that's why we wanted to make sure we talked about this, right? Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all the everydayers out there for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. I know I'm still in Los Angeles as we record this one, but next time we come